Hello, BookTube. I have a kind of a Wednesday reads for you. I've got 6 books here that I want to show you and talk about. I don't think I've shown you any of them before, and some of them are things that I'll be reading today, or that I've read recently, or that I'll be reading this week, in the time that I can snatch from what is still a fairly crushing writing schedule. And I'm not complaining at all about that when I mention that. I actually love writing. I love the act of writing. I don't know why. I know so many writers, especially working writers, deadline writers, who don't like the act of writing. They dread it, they put it off, they hate it while it's happening, and they're grateful when it's over. I don't understand that at all. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I've got quite a bit of it to do. But we've got books to look at here that, of course, I don't write after midnight anyway, so I'll be redoing a ton of reading anyway. And because I always have your well-being in mind, we're going to start these 6 books with 2 that are horrible, 2 that are angering, frustrating, polarizing, and then we'll move on to history, where we can all meet on sort of neutral ground, and then we will end with books that at least half of you the better half are going to love, are going to squee about. So we'll start off with the ugly books, the ones that I have to read anyway, and I read them so that you don't have to, so that I can let you know if something is genuinely worth your time rather than just breaking your heart. One of these 2 I have read already, and I loved it. And if you're interested in the subject, you really, really, really should read it. And that's this one. It's Igor Volsky, Guns Down, and is a new book about the author's proposals. First of all, his diagnosis of the epidemic of gun violence in America, and then his proposals on how to change it, on what to do. And he's unabashedly in favor of simply confiscating a gigantic percentage of it's over 300,000 guns that are circulating in America today, more than there are people, more than there are humans in America. And he says the only way that we're ever going to make any kind of headway here is to take most of those guns. And he phrases it really well. He has an icy, clear prose style. Let me read you a bit. 96 people die from guns in America every single day. 12,000 Americans are murdered each year. The United States has more mass shootings, gun suicides, and non-fatal gun injuries than any other industrialized country in the world. Gun safety advocates have tried to solve these problems with incremental changes such as background checks and banning assault-style military weapons. They have fallen short. In order to significantly and permanently reduce gun deaths in the United States, the country needs a bold new approach, a drastic reduction of the 390 million guns already in circulation. And did I say 1,000? A million. 390 million guns. And a new movement dedicated to a future with fewer guns. In this book, the author tells the story of how he took on the NRA by just using his Twitter account, describing how he found common ground with gun enthusiasts after spending 2 days shooting guns in the desert, and lays out a blueprint for how citizens can push their governments to reduce the number of guns in circulation and make firearms significantly harder to get. An aggressive licensing and registration initiative, federal and state buybacks of millions of guns, and tighter regulations of gun industry, the gun lobby, and gun sellers will build safer communities for all. And he lays out those ideas very clearly and very non-confrontationally. There is no way to argue with the facts that underlie the problem here. There's no way that that the gun nut side of the debate can say that those number of people aren't dying, because they're dead. So you can tell when somebody's alive and when they're dead. And one of the things that he proposes here that I hadn't given it as much thought as I should have, I think, until I read this book. But I think he's entirely right when he predicts that a generous gun buyback program would be incredibly popular, amazingly so. If you said $300-400 per gun, you'd have people lined up around the block all day from morning until night to sell their guns. The gun nuts, the ones who are Second Amendment purists, or who think that they need their guns to save them from a government gone amok or whatever, probably would not. But they are a small percentage of people who just have guns, lying around. How many times do we read in the news? It's every week, at least once, of some kid in a family home, who knew where the gun was, knew that it was loaded, and knew that as a last resort or even a first resort, it was right there. But that family has trouble with the heating bills in the winter. They would sell that gun. since the only time it's ever gone off was for that kid to kill his younger brother. So, anyway, there's a ton of food for thought in this book. It's tough to read. It's tough reading. America has a massive problem. The whole world looks at us as a weird freak in this kind of thing about gun violence. You're never safe anywhere in America that you go. So it's tough, uncomfortable reading, but well worth your time. And this next one I haven't read. Talk about tough, uncomfortable reading, though. This is not going to be easy at all to read. I wonder if I have information. No, I don't. Okay, this comes out in July, and it is by Alexandra Minna Stern, and it's called Proud Boys and the White Ethno-State. Subtitle, How the Alt-Right is Warping the American Imagination. Let me read you just a bit here. The alt-right has sadly become a household term. Beginning as a loose movement that lurked in the shadows in the early 2000s, it has achieved a level of visibility that has allowed it to expand significantly through America's culture, political, and digital landscapes. But the alt-right is also mercurial and shape-shifting, encompassing a range of believers and ideas that overlap with white nationalism, white supremacy, and neo-Nazism. It provides a big and porous tent to those who subscribe to varying forms of race and gender-based exclusion. In this book, historian Alexandra Stern excavates the memes and tropes of the alt-right, applying the tools of a scholar to explore their central texts, narratives, and insider language. You can tell already this is just going to be grotesque to read. I applaud the author, but she explains the key ideas and strategies of metapolitics and red pilling, reveals why the tagline for their most prominent publisher is Books Against Time, looks closely at the paramount fantasy of a white nirvana, the ethno-state, and shows how gender essentialism and unveils the similarities between the alt-right and the alt-light. Lastly, she takes stock of the alt-right's concerted attempts to normalize its own movement. And that is very intentional and it happens everywhere. I'll have to see. This comes out in late July, but I can't put it off. It's tiny, so it won't take me more than an hour to do, even with a pencil in hand. But I think it's a huge problem, and I've also studied this phenomenon as much as I can in articles that I think are reputable. I have studied it as much as I can, and in trying to figure out what links all of the various alt-right exponents, all of their foremost talking heads, as it were. And I think I know. I think I know what it is. And it's a process of exclusion. It's we want to exclude other people from having any of what we have. And I wonder if this book is going to identify some of the main traits that I have identified, or maybe it will teach me that I'm seeing things wrong. I think the main trait of the alt-right is sexism. I think it's the only thing that they all have in common. All of the talking heads, everybody from Milo Yiannopoulos to Stefan Molyneux to Stephen Crowder to Sargon of Akkad. The one thing I've noticed that they all have in common, very much including the women in the group, is a very Paleolithic idea of what women are in society. They're things, they're not people, they're not human, and they have roles. Certainly we can cherish them. But rights, equality, superiority? No, absolutely not. It seems to me that you can get pretty much any alt-right figure to say, at least with their mouth, well, you know, racism is bad, and racism exists. Systematic racism exists, and it's bad. Of course it's bad. But from Gavin McInnes, the actual founder of the Proud Boys, to any of the others, the one, including the women, the one thing that I've never heard any of them say is that sexism is bad, that women's complete equality, let's not draw any distinctions between any meaningful distinctions here between male and female in terms of hiring, in terms of earning potential, in terms of legal rights, parental rights, anything like that. I've never heard any alt-right person say even the words that that's not okay. They seem okay with that. I think that this might be, half the world's religions, most of the world's governments, most of the world's social organizations, they have the oldest ones from time immemorial. Their organizing principle is subjection of one half of the human race by the other half. And I don't see many differences there, but we'll see. This author is the specialist and not me. But you can see what I mean. These two things are not easy. these are going to be hard to read. So then we'll move on from there to history. History is not hard to read. History is fun to read, as I'm hoping BookTube now understands. The first one is, I think this comes out, this comes out in July. But I can't resist. I'm going to get to it right away. It's a nice big book. It's a collection of essays edited by James Banner, and it is Presidential Misconduct from George Washington to the present day. And every chapter is a president. And it's, let's see here. This book is an extension of a 1974 report on presidential misconduct commissioned by the impeachment inquiry of the House Committee on the Judiciary during the Watergate crisis. That report concluded with the Johnson administration. This book incorporates the succeeding 8 presidencies through that of Barack Obama. Its contents cover the incidents going back to Washington administration in which presidents and members of their official families were charged with corruption and illegal acts. And needless to say, it has to stop at Barack Obama because you would need a book 3 times this big just for Donald Trump. So it has to stop here. What would you do otherwise? 2 words for you: Scott Pruitt. If you don't know American politics, you won't have any idea what that name means. If you do know American politics, then you'll know that this book would not be big enough for Donald Trump's administration, even in its first 2 years. Brett Kavanaugh. There you go. That's a book that size. So this goes all the way through those presidential scandals and gives every president his time in the spotlight. and you all know already, I love American presidential studies, and I love presidential biographies. I love, historical studies of a president's time period. But I also love like sweeping surveys like this: presidents at war, presidents in peace, presidents dealing with civil rights with issues from women's rights to Reconstruction and all that. And this is presidential misconduct. That is fine by me. I love books like that. I eat them up. And then this next one is a finished copy of Robert Morrison's The Regency Years, in which the author re-examines the Regency period because, as he says, he started off. His curiosity was piqued by the period by realizing that Jane Austen wrote all of her novels during the Regency period. And he thought, well, what was in the water? What was in the air that would cause that to happen? That's an incredible feat. What would cause that to happen? Here, let me read you. The seeds of this book were planted when author Robert Morrison realized that Jane Austen had published all 6 of her monumental novels within this one decade, the Regency period in Britain, from 1811 to 1820. It was like realizing the Beatles recorded every song they wrote in the 1960s, Morrison thought. What else happened in that period, I wondered. As it turns out, seemingly everything else happened. In the Regency years, Morrison provides a delightful, rollicking survey of this singular decade of British history that encompassed staggering social change and creative development. Major novelists like Jane Austen, Sir Walter Scott, Mary Shelley, and Maria Edgeworth worked alongside poets including Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and John Keats, all while John Constable and J.M.W. Turner produced their masterpieces. George Stephenson patented his steam locomotive and set the stage for a railway revolution, while Michael Faraday pioneered investigations that launched one of the most remarkable careers in all of British science, and Charles Babbage established the principles of the modern computer. Beau Brummel revolutionized men's fashion. Steam printers made the diffusion of information more rapid and expansive than ever before. And transformational urban planning schemes like John Nash's Regent Street in London reinforced physical divisions between the wealthy and the poor. And so this author is going to takes readers through all of it, through the whole of the Regency period. So this is not, the many guidebooks that are out there to help Regency authors with the lingo or the vocabulary and whatnot. This is a history of the Regency years. And I don't remember reading, the last time I read such a book, it was decades ago that I read a study of the Regency era. And I haven't read this, but or rather I haven't reread it. I read the advanced copy and I just flew through it and I loved it. But I want to read this finished copy because I think there's a lot that I missed, especially a lot of nitpicking, because I'm not sure that the author is. I mean, time periods, historical periods are artificial by nature. I don't know. Something in the way that he reduces the accomplishments of the Regency bothered me while I was reading that first time through. That first time through, I was looking to see if this was if it cheated If it was shallow, and it isn't, it's a tremendous reading experience. The second time, when I have a work of history, especially the second time, I read slower with a pencil in hand, and I make notes, and I try to question the author. And I don't know, I credit him for his enthusiasm, but I think he might be overstating the Regency period, and we'll see. I could be wrong. He might have a lockdown case. This time, since I have the finished copy, I will go through the notes. I'll go through the bibliography, and I will see. And then we have the last two books. Now, neither of these I have read. They are right at the front of my list, and needless to say, they make me squeal. So the first one is by Carol Novello, and it is Mutual Rescue: How Adopting a Homeless Animal Can Save You Too. Mutual Rescue. And that's all that this is about. It's about adopting an animal who badly needs it instead of going to a breeder or something like that. Mutual Rescue is the first book to profile the transformational impact that pets have on humans by exploring the emotional, physical, and spiritual gifts rescued animals provide. It is not the first book on that subject, but that's okay. It's probably the only book on that subject the publicist has ever known. Compelling research is woven throughout the 4 sections of this book, which are heart, mind, body, and connection. And every chapter takes a deep dive into the animal adoption journey, deepening the understanding for every human who has ever felt enriched, soothed, or restored by an animal and wanted to know why. And I'm of course going to fly through this book. I'm going to read it right away. I'm going to fly through it. I have worked for years. I volunteered for years at an animal shelter here in Boston. I have seen the very worst of that process of just totally distracted humans coming in on their cell phone, talking about nothing on their cell phone as they drag in an older dog and surrender them to the shelter. Barely willing to fill out a form, barely willing to answer any questions, and not willing to get off their phone as they consign an older animal to death that has been with them as a companion for years. I've seen that, and I've also seen people be transformed, just the way this book describes, where they come in and they are broken and they are sad and they are sure that they are not ready and that they won't find anybody, and you see that connection. And it might not be the first dog or the first cat, it may not be the second one, it may not be the 10th one, and then the 11th one, boom, all of a sudden, whatever it is, a circuit is closed and they are connected and cannot anymore be separated. I've seen that as well, and it's amazing. I myself, I know this is kind of weird, but I've never done this, or very seldom. I think maybe once. No, I don't know. I don't think I've ever done it. I've mentioned on this channel when Lucy and Malin were ailing, when they were really sick, and when it was obvious that they weren't going to live very long. I said a few times on this channel that although it sounds wooey, fate has always put another dog in my path, or more than one dog. Whenever my lifelong dogs were getting ready to go, other dogs would come up, would come to me. I've never had to go in search of them, and that happened again. That happened with Frida, and but I still advocate it because that doesn't happen with everybody. If you're looking for an animal, if you're looking for a dog or a cat, go to your animal shelter and adopt one there, and don't indulge yourself in the ridiculous mind frame that I hear. I hear it's from so many people. I've given this advice to so many people over so many decades, where they say, well, I don't want to go to an animal shelter because you don't know what you get. It's like taking in a war baby. They're all traumatized. They're damaged. And who knows, you might not see it when you adopt them. It might turn out later. No, no, that doesn't happen. That does not happen. First of all, shelters are pretty good about screening animals and picking the ones that are adoption ready. But even if they didn't, trust me, you won't have that happen. That will not be a problem. If you're looking for a dog, dogs especially I know, but cats as well, shelters have so many cats, go to a shelter and adopt one there. Do everybody a favor. You will be rescued as well. But I mean, so this will probably have nothing in it that I don't already know, but it'll have new stories that I've never heard of individual cases, and statistics that I probably don't know. Can't wait. And the next one is also a dog book. Believe it or not, we're going to end on 2 dog books here. This is by Brian Sykes, and it is Once a Wolf. The subtitle is The Science Behind Our Dog's Astonishing Genetic Evolution. And that's what it is. It's just the story of of the history of dogs, of the paleological history of dogs, using the same brilliant genetic analysis that informed Brian Sykes' international bestsellers The Seven Daughters of Eve and Saxons, Vikings, and Celts. Here, Sykes moves on from humans to investigate the genetic makeup of our beloved canine friends. This book is a captivating evolutionary detective story that ultimately reveals how a wild predator became the pugs, corgis, and golden doodles we adore today. And then the story begins 40,000 years ago in Eastern Europe. Sykes proves that this is more than just a story of the subjugation of one species by another. It is instead a shining example of the coevolution of two species to each other's mutual benefit. Indeed, Sykes contends that the unusual alliance between Homo sapiens and wolves was one of the first vital steps in helping our species to gain the upper hand. Along with innovations like the bow and arrow and the flowering of art and music, this alliance secured our ancestors' survival through the Ice Age. And arts and music did not help to secure Homo sapiens' survival during the Ice Age. But having a colleague, a teammate in the field, who you, the six of you, manage with your weapons, your pointed weapons, your designed weapons, to mortally injure a giant woolly rhinoceros, and it runs off at 25 miles an hour, you will lose that meal. It will die and long away from you and will be consumed, colonized right away by scavengers, some of them immense. But if you have a colleague in the field who can follow and secure that kill once it drops, so much the better for all of you, not just the humans, but the colleague. And the same thing everywhere else. Dogs have super senses. They are wolves and wolf-like canids are virtually inexhaustible. They can run for 10 hours a day at relatively top speed and be none the worse for it. Need half an hour to recover. They can see in the dark. They can smell things that 2 or 3 parts of aliphatic acid per thousand. They can hear over long distances. Humans and proto-humans understood immediately that these beings had biological weapons that humans don't have. And dogs recognized a free ride. They recognized an easy partnership. And the pub sheet is far more generous than it could be. What does it say here? A shining example of the coevolution of two species as each other's mutual benefit. A shining example, but there are hardly any examples of that. Virtually none. Opportunism, sure. Taking advantage of each other, sure. Wolves, and ravens in the wild, for instance, have a kind of a working partnership sometimes. But there isn't a hungry wolf in the world who wouldn't eat a raven if you got too close. The partnership between humans and canines, I think, is unprecedented. I think it's unique, alone of its kind in the world, and amazing. And I'm eager for any new book on that subject. And this is the first new one I've seen this year. So it'll be one of the 2 dog books that I read this week. so that is it. That is a Wednesday Reads for you. So we have Once a Wolf, 2 dog books, Once a Wolf and Mutual Rescue. Sort of opposite ends of the dog spectrum there. Then we have The Regency Years and Presidential Misconduct, 2 survey books, one about the whole of American presidential misdeeds, and the other about the 10 years of the Regency and what it all meant, and maybe why it galvanized such creative activity. And then 2 tough books. We have Proud Boys and the White Ethno-State, and Guns Down, How to Defeat the NRA and Build a Safer Future with Fewer Guns. So it's a wild variety of things to show you there, but I wanted to make sure you saw them all. I don't know that we saw any of these before, and I do like torturing your TBRs. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.